We are 5 years away from entering the 21st century. Humankind stands on the edge of the interactive age. You have come a long way. But are you ready for the future?
Introducing Sega Saturn. Aw, hit it! Sega's next-generation gaming platform, revolutionary sports and arcade gameplay, all with amazing new 3D experiences never before possible on home game systems. Wow.
Sega Saturn. It's how you play the game.
What's happening? What's happening?
Sega
Saturn!
Go farther than you have ever gone before. Sega Saturn. Play your games in the 21st century and leave the rest of the world behind. I'm scared.
So, as you can probably tell, this video is going to be focused on, I think, one of Sega's crowning achievements, but it was also the most underrated video game console of all time. And with ads like that, I can definitely see why. But anyways, the Sega Saturn was in direct competition with game consoles such as the original PlayStation 1 and the Nintendo 64, and it outweighed all of them. Well, except the Nintendo 64, because technically it was 64 bits, but the Sega Saturn had something no other console had. It had 3 CPUs and 6 processors. 2 CPUs for the graphics, and 1 CPU for the sound. That was completely unheard of at the time. You know, the PlayStation 1 had 1 CPU to do everything. So that means this console is better. Well, sort of. It came out in 1995, if you couldn't get that from the demo, and, well, had some really great games, and just like the PlayStation 1, it originally came out with a D-pad only controller, which looks a hell of a lot like that, except this is a Japanese one. But later years they came out with an analog controller, just like the PlayStation 1, except that I personally don't have one, and it kind of came out around the end of the Saturn's life, which was around 1996-97. This console was only around for 2 or 3 years before it bit the dust. In North America, at least. In Japan, it was extraordinarily popular. It wasn't nearly as popular as the Genesis, but it was more popular than the Sega CD. Anyways, the Sega Saturn is a great gaming console and has really great arcade ports. There's basically 2 things you buy this system for. The arcade ports like Daytona USA, Sega Rally, Virtua Fighter, or you buy it to play Japanese import shooters. Now, of course, the Sega Saturn being a region-locked console, you can't play Japanese games, or can you? There's actually a cartridge which would plug into the cartridge input, which is really a memory card slot. You can't play your Genesis games on it. And you would put the memory card in there, and it would defeat the region lock. It was called an Action Replay 4-in-1. And that's a totally different video right there. But anyways, let's show some games, and we're going to show some gameplay, and we'll talk a little bit more about the system.
Alright, so first up we have Virtua Cop, which was a pack-in game with the Sega Saturn. And this particular game I'm not very good at, but my friend really likes it, and it's quite a nice arcade-style, you know, shoot-'em-up game. Would probably be better played with a light gun, which I believe there was an add-on for. Correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, it's a very cool game. The only problem with it is the control layout, I personally find. You have to double tap C to reload, and then A is shoot. So the buttons are spread out a bit. I wish it was double tap, say the R trigger or something. That would be a bit easier. But otherwise, the game is really good. The graphics are really great, and the music is really great. The second level, I find, is way easier than the first level. And now, of course, we get into the famed Daytona USA. This is the Championship Circuit Edition, which comes with better music and more tracks, as well as it's analog controller compatible. I did have to cut out a few bits here to make it a little bit shorter, to make things easier. And of course you start out on auto drive holding down the button, and you just basically, it's a NASCAR game. I particularly don't like the controls in this game. I find them a bit on the touchy side, and I just think that, you know, it's generally a buggy game. Well, it was because it was a launch title, and they didn't have enough time due to the problems they had with marketing the Saturn. They didn't really spend the time they needed to ironing out the kinks in this game. Even in the Championship Circuit Edition, which you see here, there's still some, you know, minor issues with it that they still didn't resolve. But overall, it's a pretty kick-ass game, and it's relatively common. This is actually the version I would recommend, because you get more tracks, better music, and overall, you also get the analog controller compatibility, which is really... Now we come to one of my favorite games on the Sega Saturn, of course being Sega Rally Championship. And again, I did cut out the menus and stuff just to quicken this up a little bit. There will be a part 2 of this with a few more games being shown and a little bit of a wrap-up. But this game, I particularly like the controls, I like the style of racing, and I also really like the gameplay, and the graphics are really good. I guess I've just had a lot of experience with really, really bad PS1 and other 32-bit racing games that really aren't any good, and the controls suck and everything else. This game, I personally think, is one of the best 32-bit racing games I've ever played. And it's far and away my favorite Saturn game that I own. Of course. But it's a really great game, and you can usually pick it up for next to nothing. So this is a really great game if you have a Saturn and you like racing. The control scheme is really responsive, and as you notice, the wheels are wobbling back and forth, because that's kind of the ideal way you want to play, is you want to rock back and forth on the D-pad a little bit and get the car to slide around the corners, and you can generally do a really good job of controlling the vehicle. You know, I prefer the Castrol rally car here, and I'm just on one of the easier tracks, but it's still a great game. We just passed by the zebra. So yeah, tune in for part 2, and we'll show some more games, more gameplay. And yeah, please comment, rate, and subscribe. Thank you very much for watching.
Over jump.